The kitchen tile bit cold through Sean Harlow's socks as his knees gave way. Atlas pressed his broad head into Sean's ribs and held it there, waiting. Mike's voice was still coming through the phone on the shelf, low, steady, calling the dog through some sunny parking lot 2 years gone. "Come on, buddy, come on back to me." And Atlas believed him. Sean, 3 tours home without breaking, broke. Before we go on, drop a comment telling me what corner of the world you're listening from, and hit subscribe so stories like this one find you again. The grey light outside the window had turned to the color of wet cement by the time Sean could move. His right hand had gone half numb from being wrapped around the dog's shoulder, and his throat felt raw in a way it hadn't since basic. Atlas hadn't shifted. The Belgian Malinois still had one paw hooked over Sean's thigh, chin resting on his knee, dark eyes tracking Sean's face with the same searching patience he had shown for 4 months, waiting for the man who wasn't coming back. Except now, Sean understood, for the first time, that Atlas hadn't been waiting for Mike out of confusion. He had been waiting because faith was the only thing the dog knew how to do. Faith was his job. Faith was his heart. Sean pushed himself up. His knees popped. He walked to the shelf, tapped the phone, and saved the 14-second clip to 2 cloud drives and a thumb drive he kept in the fireproof box under the sink. He set the phone back down. Then he walked to the corner of the garage and stood in front of the box for the first time since he had carried it in from his truck the day of the funeral. Personal. Mike's handwriting, sharp black marker on brown cardboard. Sean had walked past it every morning for 22 days. He put his hand flat against the top of the box. The cardboard was cold. Atlas came to stand beside him, not touching, just present. Sean pulled the folding knife out of his back pocket, slit the packing tape in one clean line, and opened the flaps. The first thing on top was a folded American flag. Triangular, the stitching neat. Not the presentation flag from the funeral. That one was on Kate's mantle. This one was smaller, older, edges worn soft from being folded and unfolded many times. Sean recognized it. Mike had carried this flag through 3 deployments, tucked into the top of his ruck, and had brought it out once on a hill in a country Sean would not name aloud, to bury it under a stone marker for a friend the 2 of them had lost. Mike had dug that flag back up when they left and had kept it ever since. Now he had left it for Sean. Underneath the flag was a challenge coin, the units brass and worn, and Mike's field notebook. Beat-up green moleskin, held together with a rubber band and love. Sean lifted it out with both hands. He set it on the workbench. He did not open it yet. Beside the notebook, wrapped in a shop rag, was a small handgun Sean recognized as Mike's off-duty carry. Under that was a stack of envelopes bound with a hair tie, each addressed in Mike's handwriting. The top one said, in block capitals, "For Sean, when you can." Sean sat down on the concrete floor of the garage with the notebook and the envelopes in his lap. Atlas lay down beside him and put his chin across Sean's ankle. Sean opened the notebook first. He wasn't ready for the letter. The pages were what he expected at first. Sketches of terrain, gear checklists, phone numbers he mostly recognized. A shopping list for Kate that included 2 boxes of graham crackers and a jar of the raspberry jam Mike liked from the little farm stand near the freeway. But halfway in, the handwriting changed. It got tighter, it got faster, and the content was no longer training notes or grocery lists. It was names, dates, reference numbers Sean had seen before on classified paperwork. Then a page of Mike's tight, angry printing. The dogs are missing. Files closed. No discharge paperwork. Where is Bailey? Sean stopped breathing for a second. Bailey had been another handler's dog. A German shepherd out of Mike's cohort at the K9 training facility in Virginia. Sean had met Bailey exactly once at a barbecue at Mike's house 2 summers ago and remembered him because the dog had stolen a hot dog off Sean's plate and had looked completely unrepentant about it. Bailey had been retired 8 months before Mike's last deployment. Sean had assumed Bailey was living out his golden years with his handler, a soft-spoken guy named Devon Cole, who Sean had shaken hands with twice. Sean turned the page. Mike had drawn a diagram, 6 names down the left side, 6 dog names across the top, arrows, question marks, and at the bottom, underlined twice. Who signed these off? Atlas raised his head. Sean followed the dog's gaze to the garage door. Nothing, no sound, just the wind moving the loose piece of gutter that Sean had been meaning to fix for a month. Atlas kept staring at the door for another 20 seconds, then slowly lowered his chin back onto Sean's ankle. Sean turned to the last written page in the notebook. Mike had dated it 3 days before he shipped out for what would be his final deployment. It said in careful block letters, "Sean, if you're reading this, I didn't make it back and you finally opened the box, you idiot. Go see Kate. Tell her to give you the drive. Tell her I said pie crust. She'll know. Take care of Atlas. He's yours now. No matter what they tell you, he's yours." Sean read it 3 times. Then he folded the notebook closed and pressed his palms into his eyes. That night he did not sleep on the couch. He carried the whole box up to the living room, set it on the coffee table, and sat on the couch with Atlas draped across his legs and his phone in his hand. He watched the video again, 4 times. Atlas rose to his feet each time and moved to the same waiting position. Sean stopped playing it after the 4th time because the dog would have kept doing it all night, and it wasn't fair to keep asking Atlas to hope. At 2 in the morning, Sean texted Kate DeLuca. Just 1 sentence. I opened the box. Can I come by tomorrow? She wrote back within 30 seconds. Come at 10. Emma has school. Bring the dog. He put the phone down. Atlas tucked his nose into Sean's palm. Sean held on. The DeLuca's house sat at the end of a long gravel drive on the north side of Fayetteville, a modest 1-story with a wide front porch and a maple tree that had gone the color of a bonfire in the front yard. Kate answered the door in a dark sweater and jeans, hair pulled back, eyes tired in a way that Sean recognized from his own bathroom mirror. She looked at Sean, and then she looked past him at Atlas, and something in her face softened for a second before it hardened again. Come in, she said, coffee's on. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and cinnamon. There were kids' drawings taped to the fridge, a stick figure Mike with a blue cape, a stick figure Atlas nearly as tall as Mike, both of them standing on a green line labeled Our Yard in red crayon. Kate poured him coffee without asking how he took it, remembered, and slid the milk across the counter. She sat down. She pushed a plate of cookies toward him. She said, "Pie crust." Sean set the notebook on the table. Kate looked at it and closed her eyes for a moment. He told me, she said, 6 weeks before he shipped out. He told me if anything happened, if you ever came asking, and if you said pie crust, I was supposed to give you the drive. I told him he was being dramatic. He said good, he hoped so. She got up and walked out of the room. Sean heard a drawer open somewhere in the back of the house. Atlas sat under the kitchen table, still and alert, his eyes on the doorway Kate had gone through. When she came back, she was holding a small silver USB drive and a manila folder. She set both down in front of Sean. I don't know what's on it, she said. I never looked. He asked me not to unless something happened, and when something happened I wasn't ready, and then you stopped answering your phone, so I put it in a drawer and told myself I'd wait for you to be ready. I'm sorry. Don't, Sean said. His voice came out rougher than he meant. Don't apologize. Kate looked at Atlas. How's he been? Waiting, Sean said. Every day. He waits by the door around the time Mike used to come home. I couldn't figure out how to tell him. Kate's throat moved. She reached under the table and Atlas came out from under the chair and pushed his head against her knee. She scratched him behind the ears with the kind of familiarity that comes from 100 backyard afternoons. There's something else, she said. 2 weeks ago I got a call from a Lieutenant Colonel Bradford. He said Atlas was never properly discharged. He said the paperwork was incomplete, that Atlas is technically still on the books as an active working dog, and that they needed to reassign him. I told him Mike had adopted the dog. He said there was no adoption paperwork on file. I told him to check again. He said he had, and there wasn't. And that if I couldn't produce it in 30 days, they'd send someone out. Sean set his coffee down slowly. Send someone out for what? For Atlas. The room went quiet. Atlas had turned his head at the sound of his name and now looked between them with his ears at the alert position, reading their faces the way dogs like him read every room they walked into. Sean opened the manila folder. Inside was a photocopy of a set of forms, a canine retirement and disposition packet filled out in Mike's precise hand, signed by Mike and countersigned by a name Sean didn't recognize. The dates were correct. The paperwork looked clean, except every copy in the folder was a Xerox. There were no originals. He gave me these copies the week before he left, Kate said. He said the originals were being processed through channels. He said Bradford was slow walking them. He said not to worry. He was worried, Sean said. He was worried, Kate agreed. Sean took the drive and the folder home. He didn't plug the drive in that night. He sat on the couch with Atlas beside him and stared at the little silver rectangle on the coffee table like it was a live thing that might jump. He had the shape of what was on it in his mind already. Mike's notebook had told him enough. Names, files, dogs that had been retired on paper and then had disappeared, handlers who had asked questions and had been transferred to bases where nobody would take their calls. Working dogs, some of the most extensively trained animals on Earth, animals whose training cost the American taxpayer 6 figures apiece, vanishing between the shredder and the boarding kennel. At 6 in the morning, Sean made coffee. He plugged the drive into his laptop. Atlas lay across his feet and breathed. There were 3 folders on the drive. One was labeled Dogs. One was labeled Handlers. One was labeled Audio. The Dogs folder had 32 names. Bailey was the first. Atlas was second to last. Each name had a subfolder with a photograph, service records, an intake date, and, in almost every case, a disposition date with a scanned form that Mike had annotated in the margins with a red digital pen. Every red note said some version of the same thing. Signature altered, date inconsistent with orders, handler not informed, no adoption application on file. Sean scrolled to Atlas's folder. There was a photo of Atlas as a puppy, sitting in a training harness that was 3 sizes too big, tongue out. There was Mike's original adoption application, filed 9 months before his last deployment. It had never been approved, it had never been denied, it had simply been marked in the system as pending further review. Mike's red note under the file said, 13th request, still pending. B will not answer. B was Bradford. Sean opened the handler's folder. 9 names. Devon Cole was one of them. Beside Devon's name, Mike had written in a note dated 3 months before he shipped out, Devon died in a car accident on a road he had driven 1,000 times. His dog Bailey disappeared from records the same week. His widow is Rachel. I cannot find her. Help me find her. Sean sat back. The coffee in his hand had gone cold. Atlas raised his head at the change in Sean's breathing and put his front paws up on the couch, checking. I'm all right, Sean said. He wasn't, but he ran his hand down the dog's neck. I'm all right, buddy. He opened the audio folder last. There were 4 files. 3 of them were labeled with dates from the previous year. One was labeled, in Mike's shorthand, Insurance. Sean played that one first. Mike's voice again, not the sunny parking lot voice from the training video. This one was low and careful, recorded in a room with a lot of echo, the way voices sound in a truck cab or a bathroom. This is Mike DeLuca. Today's date is the 4th of March. I'm recording this because I believe Lieutenant Colonel Alan Bradford is coordinating the unofficial reassignment of retired military working dogs to a private security firm called Ridgeline Solutions. based out of a warehouse address in Charlotte. I believe he is falsifying the disposition paperwork after the fact and pocketing the transfer fees. I believe Devon Cole was killed because he was about to file a formal complaint. I have not been able to prove that. I'm recording this in case something happens to me, so that whoever finds it knows where to look. The evidence on this drive is my best work. It is not complete, but it is enough for someone with a badge and a subpoena to finish. If you are hearing this and you are Sean Harlow, brother, I'm sorry, I know what I'm asking. Take care of Atlas, take care of Kate, and don't let this die with me. The recording ended. Sean sat at the kitchen table for a long time, with his hands flat on the wood. Atlas had gotten up onto the chair beside him and was leaning his full weight against Sean's shoulder in a way that violated a dozen rules Mike had trained into him, and that Sean did not have the heart to correct. Outside, the maple in Sean's yard was letting go of its last handful of leaves in the wind. Sean picked up his phone. He called Kate. "There's something on the drive," he said. "There's a lot on the drive. Do you know a Rachel Cole?" "Devon Cole's wife," Kate said. "I met her twice, sweet woman. Mike went to Devon's funeral. He was upset for weeks after. Do you have her number?" Kate was silent for a moment. "I don't, but I know someone who will." An hour later, Sean's phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Harlow?" A woman's voice, careful, tired. "This is Rachel Cole. Kate said I should call you. She said it was important." "It's about your husband," Sean said, "and Mike, and Bailey. Can we meet?" Rachel was quiet for so long, Sean thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "Not on the phone. There's a diner on Bragg Boulevard called the Yellow Rose. I can be there at 3. Bring the dog if you can. I need to see him." "Why?" "Because I need to know he's real. I need to see with my own eyes that at least one of them made it out, please." Sean got to the Yellow Rose at 2:45. Atlas came inside on a slip lead, wearing the service dog patch that had never quite been officially valid, and the waitress, who apparently was married to a Marine, said nothing except, "Would he like water?" and set down a stainless steel bowl beside the booth. Rachel Cole was already there. She was maybe 35, with kind eyes that had cried recently and a wedding band she still hadn't taken off. When Sean and Atlas slid into the booth across from her, Rachel put her hand over her mouth and looked at the dog like he was the answer to a question she had stopped asking. "Bailey looked like him," she said when she could. "Same build, same eyes. Devon used to say Bailey was the smartest one he'd ever worked with." "Tell me what happened," Sean said. She told him. She told him that Devon had come home 8 months before his death, carrying a folder he wouldn't put down. That he had spent nights at the kitchen table making phone calls to numbers Rachel didn't recognize. The 2 weeks before he died, he had told her that if anything ever happened to him, she was supposed to call a man named Mike DeLuca. That the day Devon died, going to the grocery store, 3 miles from their house, in the middle of the afternoon, no other cars around, the accident report had said he had lost control of the vehicle, and that when Rachel had gone to pick up Bailey from the kennel where the base was boarding him temporarily during their move, the kennel manager had told her Bailey had been transferred out that morning. When she asked to whom, he could not tell her. When she asked why, he could not tell her. When she asked for paperwork, he had suddenly needed to take a call in the back and had not come out again. "I called Mike 3 days later," Rachel said. "He sat in my kitchen for 4 hours. He wrote everything down. He told me he was going to find Bailey. He told me he was going to make it right. And then a few months later, I got a call that Mike had been killed on deployment. That was 6 months ago. Nobody has ever contacted me about Bailey again. I don't know if he's alive. I don't know where he is. I don't know anything." Atlas, under the table, put his head across Rachel's foot the way he did with Sean when Sean's breathing got shallow. Rachel let out a small startled sound and then, very carefully, reached her hand down under the table. Sean watched her face change. "He's a good boy," she whispered. "He's the best I've ever seen," Sean said. They talked for 2 hours. Rachel had her own folder of things. Devon's copies of some of the same forms Mike had photographed, a few extra phone numbers, an email address for a woman named Denise Aponte, who used to work in the base's kennel records office and who had left her job under circumstances Rachel described as sudden. When Rachel got up to leave, she leaned down and put both hands on either side of Atlas's face and pressed her forehead to his forehead and said, in a voice too soft for the room to hear, "Thank you for being here. Thank you for being." Sean walked her to her car. Before she got in, she turned to him. "Mr. Harlow, my husband was a good man. He was a good handler. He was a good father. And someone killed him for asking a question. Whatever you do next, please don't stop asking it." "I won't," Sean said. He meant it. But that night, driving home with Atlas in the passenger seat and the drive and the folders locked in a case under the back bench, Sean understood for the first time that he was in something now. He had been drifting for 4 months, sleepwalking through the shape of his own house. He was awake now. And there were people on the other side of this who had already killed at least one man to keep it quiet. The next morning, someone had slashed the 2 rear tires on Sean's truck, not the front, the back. The kind of message that isn't a robbery. The kind of message that is a hand on your shoulder in a crowded room. Sean stood in the driveway with his coffee and his coat over his pajamas and looked at the tires and understood. He didn't call the police. He called Vince Delaney. Vince and Sean had gone through Bud S together. Vince had washed out in phase 2 with a stress fracture in his tibia that healed wrong, and had gone to law school instead, telling everyone he met that it was the second most painful thing he'd ever done. He now had a small practice in Raleigh that specialized in what he called veterans who somebody was trying to screw. He answered on the second ring. "Delaney. Vince, it's Sean. Somebody's messing with me. And I need to know if there's anything I can do to lock Atlas in legally before they come and take him." "Slow down. Talk to me." Sean talked. Vince listened the way he had always listened, completely, without interrupting. Taking notes, Sean could hear him writing over the line. When Sean was done, Vince was quiet for 10 seconds. "Okay, first, no more talking on this line. I want you to drive to my office tomorrow. Bring everything. Bring the drive, the notebook, the folders, the letter, all of it. Bring the dog. We're going to file for an emergency injunction against any reassignment while we sort out the paperwork. That's step 1. Step 2. I want you to think very hard about who else knows what you know. Because whoever slashed those tires knows something. And they didn't hear it from me. Kate, Rachel, that's it. Neither of them slashed your tires. No. Then somebody's watching you, or somebody was watching Mike and inherited you. Be smart. Don't stay in the house alone tonight. Actually, where's the dog right now?" Sean looked at Atlas, who was sitting inside the storm door, watching Sean through the glass with his ears at full alert. "He's inside. He's fine. Keep him with you. If anyone shows up at your door claiming any kind of authority, do not open it. Call me first. I mean it." "I hear you." "Sean, one more thing." "Yeah." Mike was smart. He was smart and he was careful. If he put a drive in his wife's dresser and told her to give it to you, it wasn't because he was being dramatic. He knew this was coming. He tried to build a case that would outlive him. Don't waste it. "I won't." Vince hung up. Sean stood in the driveway for another minute looking at the tires until Atlas whined once from behind the storm door and Sean went inside. He drove to Raleigh the next morning on the spare tire and a borrowed tire from his neighbor Frank, who did not ask questions and gave Sean a jerky stick from his glove box for the dog. Vince's office was on the second floor of a converted brick building on the edge of downtown, above a bakery that made the whole stairwell smell like cinnamon rolls. Atlas walked up the stairs beside Sean with the calm ceremony he brought to everything indoors. Vince met them at the door with a handshake for Sean and a bow of the head for Atlas, and then said, "In." They worked for 6 hours. Vince read the notebook cover to cover. He watched Mike's insurance recording twice. He went through the dog's folder file by file, and Sean watched a professional's face slide from skepticism into something narrower and colder as the pattern emerged. When Vince was done, he leaned back in his chair, put his hands on top of his head and said, "Well, it's real. Yeah, you know what this is? I've got an idea. This is a fraud case. It's a big fraud case. Every one of these dogs, when you add up the training investment and the transfer fees somebody's pocketing, is worth low 6 figures. 32 dogs across, 18 months? That's a lot of money. That's the kind of money people kill for. Which brings us to Devon Cole. Mike thought Devon was killed to keep him quiet. Mike may have been right. That's not something we prove today. Today we prove Atlas is yours. We file everything, and we get the drive into the hands of someone at Justice who can move on Bradford. There's a woman there I trust. She'll take my call, but she's going to want originals. This drive is Mike's copies. We need to find out where the originals are. The originals of what? Of the personnel files, of the disposition paperwork, of any communication between Bradford and this private security firm. And this witness Mike mentions in his notes, Denise Aponte. Rachel Cole has her email address. Then Rachel Cole and I are going to have a conversation. Vince filed the emergency injunction that same afternoon. He filed with the federal court, invoking a provision of the National Defense Authorization Act that covers military working dogs and their handlers. He also filed a preservation order for the paperwork Bradford held. By 6 o'clock, an email had gone out from Vince's office to Colonel Bradford's official address, copy to Bradford's superior, notifying them that Atlas was subject to a court injunction and that any attempt to transfer, reassign, or relocate the dog would be a violation of a federal court order. Vince smiled thinly at his screen when he clicked send. "There," he said. "Now we've made him mad." That's the goal. That's step 2. Sean and Atlas drove home in the dusk. The maples along the highway had gone from bonfire to bruise, deep purple-red in the low light. Atlas rode with his head on Sean's thigh, watching the road, occasionally lifting his nose to sniff at the vent when the truck passed a field where deer had crossed. Sean's hand rested on the flat of the dog's shoulder. He had not touched the dog like this, casually, with the ease of a man who took a thing for granted since the day Atlas had come to live with him. Something had shifted between them. It had been shifting all week. He was not just watching over Mike's dog anymore. He was becoming, without any decision, the dog's man. They were half a mile from Sean's driveway when the phone rang. It was Tommy Reyes. Tommy and Sean had gone through the pipeline together, one class after Mike. Tommy had left the teams after his 3rd deployment because he had a wife and 2 little boys, and had made a promise to his oldest that he would be at every one of her softball games until she graduated. He was now an insurance adjuster with a house in Cary and a truck full of catcher's mitts. He was one of the 2 men in Sean's phone Sean would have said, without hesitation, would do anything for him. "Hey, brother," Tommy said, "you got a second? Got the whole ride home. What's up? Look, this might be nothing, but I got a call from a guy today. Guy I don't really know. He said he heard I was tight with you. Started asking questions about you and this dog situation. Said there might be a way I could help him, and it'd be worth my while." Sean's grip tightened on the wheel. Atlas raised his head at the change. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to go screw himself, but I wanted you to know somebody's shopping around." "Who was the guy?" "Wouldn't give me a name, said he'd be in touch." "Sean, you doing okay? Whatever this is, it sounded like it's getting big." "I'm okay. I've got a lawyer. I've got the dog. I'm okay." "You want me to come out for a few days?" "I can be there tomorrow. Sarah won't mind." "Not yet. If I need you, I'll ask." "You always were bad at asking." Sean managed a small, dry laugh. Yeah. Sean, listen, I'm serious. Whatever you need, I owe you and Mike more than I can pay back in this lifetime. You call me. I hear you, Tommy. Thanks. They hung up. Sean pulled into his driveway. His floodlights were on. His front door was closed. His storm door was closed. The house looked exactly the way he had left it. He sat in the truck for a full minute anyway, watching before he got out. Atlas moved through the house ahead of him on the walkthrough Mike had trained him to do, checking every room, ears up, nose working, tail low and steady. When the dog came back to Sean at the kitchen doorway and gave him one soft, unbothered look, Sean unclenched his shoulders. Nobody had been inside, but somebody was watching. Sean sat at the kitchen table with the shotgun leaning against the fridge, not because he thought he would need it, but because it made Mike's ghost quieter, and fed Atlas his dinner by hand, one kibble at a time, the way you did with a young dog on the first week, when you were teaching him that food came from you and only from you. Atlas took each piece with the careful softness of a professional. Between mouthfuls, he leaned his chest against Sean's leg. Sean, for the first time in his adult life, said grace over a bowl of dog kibble in a whisper, just because he couldn't think what else to do with the feelings. The next 4 days were quiet. Vince filed, Vince called. Vince met with the federal attorney he trusted, a woman named Angela Reeves, who Vince said had never in her career pulled a punch on a bad officer. Reeves took the drive. Reeves took the notebook. Reeves took the folder Rachel Cole had. Reeves interviewed Rachel by video, and then, 2 days later, interviewed Denise Aponte in person at a coffee shop in Raleigh, and came out of that interview, according to Vince, wearing the expression she wears when she's already writing the indictment. Kate came out to Sean's house on the 3rd day with a pan of lasagna and a book Emma had drawn for Atlas. The book was called Atlas and the Friendly Monster, and was 7 pages long, and involved Atlas defeating a large green squid using only his loyalty and his good manners. Sean read it to the dog. Atlas listened with grave attention. Kate cried and laughed at the same time in the kitchen doorway. On the 5th day, Bradford served notice. It came by certified mail. It was signed by an assistant United States attorney in the Military Affairs Division, not Angela Reeves, someone from a different office, someone Vince didn't recognize when Sean read him the name over the phone. The notice invoked an obscure administrative procedure that allowed a working dog to be recalled to service for a readiness assessment pending resolution of any adoption dispute. It gave Sean 14 days to surrender Atlas to Fort Bragg's Veterinary Services Division for a temporary hold, at the end of which a formal administrative hearing would determine the dog's disposition. Vince swore at his phone for a full minute when Sean read it to him. "That's a countermove," he said. "That's Bradford saying, 'Fine, you're in court, I'll go around court.' This is not a court order, Sean. This is administrative. It's designed to run parallel and get the dog into the wind while everybody argues jurisdiction." "What do I do?" "You do not surrender the dog. Not to that officer, not to that vet, not to anybody in a uniform who shows up on your porch. You call me. And you and I are going to get in front of a judge, and we are going to ask the judge to enjoin this administrative process too, which he will, because it is transparently retaliatory. But listen to me, this means Bradford knows something has changed. He knows we've talked to Aponte, or he knows we've talked to somebody, and he is panicking. Panicking men are the most dangerous kind. Do not sleep in that house alone tonight. Where do I go? Come to my place. Bring the dog. Bring the shotgun. I'll put the coffee on." Sean loaded the truck in 20 minutes. He put Atlas in the passenger seat. He locked the house. He backed down the driveway. He drove east on the 2-lane and pulled onto the interstate and did not stop for gas until he was 40 miles from home. Atlas rode beside him, calm as always, chin on the console. When Sean turned off the interstate onto the state road that would take him to Vince's neighborhood in Raleigh, headlights came up behind him and stayed there, not close, not tailgating, just a steady quarter-mile back, matching Sean's speed, matching his lane changes. Sean watched the headlights in the mirror for 6 miles. He turned off onto a side road that led to a gas station. The headlights turned off with him. He pulled into the gas station. The headlights went past, kept going down the state road, disappeared around the curve. Sean sat in the parked truck for 10 minutes. His hands were steady. Atlas, in the passenger seat, was watching Sean's face with an intensity that told Sean the dog had felt the change in his breathing all 6 of those miles. "I'm all right," Sean told him. He put his hand on the dog's shoulder. "You're all right. We're going to be all right." He drove the rest of the way to Vince's with the shotgun where he could reach it, and no one followed. Vince was in his driveway when Sean pulled in a bathrobe over sweatpants, holding a coffee. He looked at Sean's face and then at Atlas and said, "In." They sat at Vince's kitchen table until 3 in the morning. Vince laid out the plan. The hearing Bradford had triggered would happen on a Tuesday in Fort Bragg's administrative court. Vince intended to be there. Vince intended to bring Angela Reeves with him. He intended to hand the presiding officer on the same morning a federal preservation order signed by a district judge, and he intended to inform the court that a federal criminal investigation was already underway. If they were lucky, the hearing would be adjourned before it began. If they were not lucky, Vince would present Sean's case on the merits, Mike's paperwork, Mike's recording, Kate's testimony, Rachel Cole's testimony, Aponte's affidavit, and would ask the presiding officer to rule from the bench. 2 weeks, Vince said. 2 weeks and we're done with this or we're deep in this. You okay to stay here for 2 weeks? I can't, Sean said. The house, Emma's book. Frank next door will feed the dog if I ask him, but I can't be gone 2 weeks. Then we set up cameras, and you stay for tonight, and tomorrow we drive back together in daylight, and you promise me you will not, under any circumstance, open your door to a man in a uniform between now and that hearing. I promise. Good. Now sleep. Atlas, you're on the couch. Atlas gave Vince a slow, measured look, the look he gave anyone who addressed him personally, and then walked over to the couch, hopped up, and turned 3 careful circles before lying down with a sigh. Sean followed suit on the love seat across the room. He slept for 6 hours without dreaming. It was the best sleep he had had since Mike had gone. On the 12th day, 3 days before the hearing, Tommy Reyes drove out to Sean's house unannounced. He pulled into the driveway around 4 in the afternoon in his silver work truck, with the softball equipment still in the back and a case of the local beer on the passenger seat. He stepped out with his hands up and a smile on his face and said, "Brother, I brought dinner, and I brought the good stuff. Don't shoot me." Sean, who had been on the porch when the truck came up the driveway, put his hand down off the shotgun and smiled back. "You could have called." "I did, twice, went to voicemail. Figured you were dodging me and I was going to have to force the issue, which is what I'm doing." "Come on in." Tommy came in. He set the beer on the counter. He greeted Atlas the way Tommy had always greeted Atlas, palm out, gentle, respectful, the two of them going way back. Atlas sniffed his hand and then leaned into his leg in the polite way a working dog acknowledges an old friend. Tommy scratched him behind the ears. "How you holding up?" Tommy said. "I'm holding." "Yeah, I can see that." Tommy popped 2 beers, handed Sean one, and sat down on the couch. Atlas sat between them, ears at half alert, looking from face to face. "Look, I heard some things today." "From who?" "That guy from before, the one shopping around. He called me back. He wouldn't give me his name, but he was more direct this time. He said he knows I'm your friend. He said he knows you're going into a hearing next week. He said there was a way for you to walk out of that hearing with the dog. Keep the dog, be done. No more court, no more lawyers, if you just handed over what was on the drive." Sean set his beer down. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'd talk to you." Sean looked at Tommy. Tommy looked back. His face was open and steady, the same face Sean had known for 15 years, the face that had pulled him out of the surf during Hell Week when his legs had quit, the face that had stood next to him at Mike's funeral with his hand on Sean's elbow the whole ceremony. "Tommy," Sean said slowly, "why would you talk to me about it?" Tommy blinked. "What? Why would you carry a message from a man who won't give his name and who is trying to obstruct a federal investigation? Why would you carry that message to my kitchen?" Tommy looked at the beer in his hand. He looked at Atlas. He looked at Sean. His face did not change exactly, but something behind it shifted. Sean saw it. He had seen it on the faces of men in bad rooms, in bad places all over the world, and it always meant the same thing. "I was going to tell you no," Tommy said quietly. "I want you to know that. I was going to sit here and drink a beer with you and tell you what he said and then tell you to nail him to the wall. But he offered a lot of money, and Sarah's out of work, and the roof on our house is going to go this winter, and my youngest, Sean, my youngest, needs a surgery next spring the insurance is going to fight. And I sat in my truck for 20 minutes in your driveway before I came in this house." Sean set his beer down. Atlas, sensing the pressure in the room, stood up. His ears were fully forward now. He was reading everything. "You were going to do it," Sean said. "I don't know," Tommy said. "I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I came out here to find out." There was a very long silence. Outside, a truck passed on the road, and Sean's neighbor's dog barked twice. Inside, the refrigerator hummed. Atlas breathed. Sean looked at the man he had trusted for 15 years and understood that he was still, in this moment, deciding whether he could keep trusting him. "Give me your phone," Sean said. "What?" "Give me your phone." Tommy handed it over. Sean opened the recent calls. There was the number, an out-of-state area code, from earlier that afternoon. Sean copied it into his own phone. He handed Tommy's phone back. "You're going to leave," Sean said. "Now, and you're going to call Vince Delaney on your way home. His number is on my fridge. You are going to tell him exactly what you told me. He's going to have you make a statement. You are going to help him identify this man. And you are going to do this, Tommy, not because you owe me, but because you owe Mike, and because you owe your own kids the right to grow up believing their father was the man you thought you were until 20 minutes ago in that truck." Tommy sat with the beer in his hand. His eyes were wet. "Sean!" "Go home, Tommy." Tommy stood up. He set the beer down on the coffee table. He looked at Atlas one more time. Atlas looked back at him with the same soft, ancient patience the dog had for everyone. No judgment, only presence. Tommy nodded once. He walked out. Sean heard the truck start. Sean heard it back down the driveway. Sean heard it turn onto the road and drive away. Sean sat on the couch and put both hands over his face for a full minute. Atlas climbed into his lap, all 90 pounds, and stayed there, huge and warm and unbothered, while Sean's shoulders shook. Then Sean picked up his phone and called Vince. Vince met Tommy at his office at 8 the next morning. Tommy showed up in a button-down shirt and gave a 2-hour statement. He handed over his phone for forensic imaging. He agreed to cooperate fully. Angela Reeves's office traced the number that had called Tommy to a burner phone that had been activated in a strip mall convenience store outside Charlotte on the same day as the notice from the assistant U.S. attorney had been dated. The convenience store had a security camera. The security camera had captured, in 11 pixels of grainy black and white, the profile of a man who was 90% certainly Lieutenant Colonel Alan Bradford. Vince called Sean that night at 10. "They're going to arrest him," Vince said. "Reeves is filing the affidavits tonight. She wants to serve the warrant Monday morning. The hearing's Tuesday. Which means he knows he has one weekend to make something happen. Sean, listen very carefully. From now until Monday morning, I want you and Atlas to be somewhere Bradford does not know about. Do you have somewhere?" "Kate's." "No, that's the first place he'll look." Rachel's. Also the first place. Somewhere new, Sean thought. My uncle has a cabin outside Cherokee, 2 hours west. Nobody knows about it. Go there, tonight. Don't tell anybody where you're going, just tell me, and keep the phone off unless you're calling me from a landline. Sean left within the hour. He packed light. He put Atlas in the truck. He drove west into the mountains through the last of the fall color, past small towns that were closing up for the night, past the last diner with its neon still on, up into the pines and the dark. The cabin was where he remembered it, a small A-frame with a stone chimney and a wood stove, and no cell service for 4 miles in any direction. Sean got a fire going. Atlas walked the perimeter, satisfied himself, and came inside to lie in front of the stove. Sean slept on the couch, in front of the fire, with the dog against his chest, and one hand loose around a shotgun. He dreamed about Mike. In the dream, Mike was standing in a sunny parking lot in shorts and a faded t-shirt, and Atlas was doing a training run, figure eights around Mike's legs, and Mike was laughing, saying, "Come on, buddy, come on back to me." And in the dream, Atlas ran up to Mike, and Mike knelt down, and Atlas pressed his forehead to Mike's forehead. And Mike looked up and saw Sean standing at the edge of the parking lot and said, "Thanks, brother, you got him." Sean woke up crying. Atlas licked his face once. Sean laughed. The fire was almost out. He rebuilt the fire. He sat on the couch with the dog in the dark. Outside, an owl called twice. The world felt like it had shrunk down to this cabin, this dog, this fire, this last waiting. Monday morning, Angela Reeves's team arrested Lieutenant Colonel Alan Bradford at his home on Fort Bragg at 6:30 in the morning. He was taken into custody without incident. Federal agents also served warrants at the offices of Ridgeline Solutions in Charlotte. 12 missing military working dogs were located, 11 of them alive, in various kennel facilities across 3 states, being held for private security contract work. Bailey was one of the 11. Rachel Cole was called at 9:15 that morning and told her husband's dog was on his way home. Sean got the news from Vince at 11, driving back down the mountain at the first spot with a signal. Sean pulled the truck over onto the shoulder. He put his hand over Atlas's head. Atlas, who had felt Sean's breathing change, looked up and pressed his skull into Sean's palm. "They got him," Sean said. "They got him, buddy. They got him." He drove home. He unpacked. He called Kate. Kate called Rachel. Rachel called Kate back an hour later. Rachel drove 300 miles that day to a kennel outside Atlanta and picked Bailey up. And by nightfall, Rachel Cole was sitting on her living room floor in Fayetteville with her arms around a 9-year-old German shepherd who had put both paws on her shoulders and had been licking the tears off her face for 40 minutes without stopping. Sean got the video Rachel sent later that night. He watched it 3 times. Atlas watched it with him, his ears twitching a little at the sound of Rachel's voice, and Sean scratched him behind the ears and said, "See, buddy, that's what your dad did. That's what your dad did." Tuesday morning, Sean and Atlas drove to Fort Bragg for the hearing. The hearing was largely a formality by then. Vince and Angela Reeves handed the presiding officer, a colonel named Harriet Vance, whom Vince had never met but whose reputation for fairness Vince trusted, a stack of paperwork that included the federal preservation order, the federal criminal indictment against Bradford, sworn affidavits from Angela Reeves and Denise Aponte, and a letter from the base commander himself acknowledging that Atlas's adoption paperwork had been improperly held in administrative limbo by an officer now in federal custody. Colonel Vance read the paperwork. Colonel Vance looked at Sean. Colonel Vance looked at Atlas, who was sitting quietly at Sean's left heel, exactly where he had sat next to Mike 10,000 times. "Master Chief Harlow," Colonel Vance said, "I have been in this uniform for 29 years. I have seen a lot of things I am proud of and some things I am not. What Lieutenant Colonel Bradford has been alleged to have done to these animals and to the handlers who loved them is one of the latter. It is a betrayal of the trust this branch places in its officers, and it is a personal insult to the memory of Chief Petty Officer DeLuca, who by all accounts died trying to expose it. This administrative process is dismissed. Atlas is yours. He has been yours since the day Chief DeLuca signed that adoption application. I am directing my staff to expedite the corrected paperwork today. You will receive it before you leave this building. Take him home, Master Chief. Take good care of him, and thank you for finishing what your friend started. Sean's throat had closed up somewhere around, "It is a personal insult." He couldn't speak. He nodded. Colonel Vance nodded back. Vince put his hand on Sean's shoulder. Atlas leaned against Sean's leg. They walked out of the administrative building into the November sunlight with a folder full of stamped paperwork and Atlas's corrected DD Form 214 for a K-9 discharge, signed, dated, notarized official. On the sidewalk outside, a small group of people was waiting. Kate, Emma holding a hand-lettered sign that said Atlas is home in blue marker. Rachel Cole, with Bailey on a leash beside her. Denise Aponte, who Sean had never met, standing off to the side with tears streaming down her face. Vince's paralegal, and a couple of men and women Sean didn't recognize, wearing the small round pins of the K-9 handler community, who had heard through the network and had shown up because that is what handlers do for each other. Emma ran straight to Atlas. She threw her arms around his neck. Atlas held perfectly still and let her. Bailey and Atlas sniffed each other with the grave courtesy of two old professionals meeting for the second time and finding no reason to complicate the acquaintance. Sean stood on the sidewalk with his friend's paperwork in his hand and looked around at the people who had shown up. Kate was crying. Rachel was crying. Emma was holding on to Atlas. And Sean, who had spent 4 months believing he was alone in a house with a dog, neither of them knew what to do with, understood in that moment that he had not been alone. He had been in the middle of a community that had been waiting for him to look up. He went home. He drove home slowly through the last of the fall color, with Atlas beside him on the passenger seat and the paperwork in a folder on the dashboard and the radio playing a country song Mike would have liked. He pulled into his driveway. He got out. He walked around to the passenger side. He opened the door. Atlas jumped down. They went into the house together. Sean stood in the kitchen for a minute. Then he walked to the shelf. He picked up the phone. He walked back to the couch. He sat down. Atlas jumped up next to him and settled against his side with a long, satisfied sigh. Sean opened the shared album. He tapped the video. Mike's voice came out of the little speaker, warm and easy, from a sunny parking lot 2 years ago. "Come on, buddy. Come on back to me." Atlas raised his head. His ears went to full alert. He looked at the phone. Then he looked at Sean. And for the first time, he did not get up. He did not walk to the shelf. He did not turn in the circle. He did not sit in the heel spot and wait. He looked at Sean with his old dark eyes, and he laid his chin across Sean's chest, and he closed his eyes. Because he had understood finally what Sean had understood weeks ago in this same kitchen, that the voice was a memory, that the man was gone, that the waiting was over, and that the hands on him now were the hands he was going to walk into the rest of his life beside. Sean let the video play out. He let Mike's laugh come through the speaker one more time. Then he set the phone down. Outside, the November sun was going soft in the yard. Inside, a dog and a man breathed together on a couch. The house felt, for the first time in 4 months, like it was full and not empty, like it was a home and not a waiting room. Sean bent his head and pressed his face into the short fur at Atlas's neck the way he had that first night. This time, he was not crying. He was thanking someone. Mike, wherever he was. For the dog. For the last unfinished job Mike had left him. For the recording that had cracked him open when he had needed cracking. For the family that had turned out to be waiting at the end of a very dark hallway. For the small, faithful animal who had believed with everything he was that love did not stop when a voice on a phone did. Atlas sighed. He shifted his weight. He tucked one enormous paw under Sean's arm and slept. Outside, a few last leaves let go of the maple in the yard and drifted down onto the driveway. A neighbor's porch light came on. Somewhere in the distance, a train sounded its long note through the cold air. In a small living room outside Fayetteville, a man who had come home from 3 wars and had almost lost the 4th one alone in a kitchen held onto a dog who was not confused anymore and understood that grief, if you let it, will teach you what love actually is. If this story reached you tonight, if you saw Sean on that cold kitchen floor and saw Atlas press his head into his ribs and felt something move in your own chest, then do me a favor. Leave a comment for Mike and Devon and every handler like them, and for the dogs who never stopped waiting. Hit that like button so more people find this story, and subscribe, because there are more of these coming, and I want to keep telling them for as long as you want to keep listening. Take care of each other out there, and if you have someone at home tonight, a person, a dog, anyone, go sit with them for a minute before you go to sleep. That's what the story was about in the end. That's all it was ever about.